Amanda Sloat, the Brookings Institution. Turkey and the West. Keep calm and muddle through.
What do we do about Turkey? This is a question that's animating policymakers and analysts in Washington, Brussels, Berlin, and elsewhere in Europe, and I think is seen as a question of particular concern in the United States, with 3 senior officials engaging with their Turkish interlocutors this week. The thing that makes Turkey such a challenging policy conundrum can be summarized in one sentence. Its problematic leadership is facing real threats. And frankly, I think this juxtaposition is something that is often lost on the West. If you look at Turkey, they're facing significant challenges both domestically and regionally. Domestically, Turkey is dealing with a lot of the consequences still from the aftermath of the July 2016 coup attempt. They're also dealing with a lot of challenges of their own making in terms of the government's crackdown on civil society, the continuation of the state of emergency, the implication that that is having for the health of Turkey's economy. If you look at Turkey's region, they sit in a very challenging neighborhood, with wars continuing to rage in Syria, challenges in Iraq, and elsewhere. And as the previous speaker outlined, a significant refugee challenge with upwards of 3.5 million refugees inside Turkey's borders. As I have looked around the debates in Washington and in Europe, there seem to be 3 main schools of thought about how we should deal with Turkey. The first approach is what I call abandonment. In its most extreme version, this is to kick Turkey out of NATO, since we decide Turkey is now a bad ally. This, I think, is flawed. If we think Turkey is challenging to deal with inside NATO, imagine the challenge of dealing with Turkey outside NATO. And frankly, the only countries that benefit from that are those who don't want Turkey facing west, which of course includes Russia, as the previous speaker was also dealing with the challenges there. A softer version of this has to do with EU accession. There's been a lot of talk within Europe about whether or not it's still valid to continue the accession process with Turkey. My argument is that it is. It's clear to both Turkey and to the EU that Turkey is not going to join the European Union anytime soon, but the reality is the process keeps Turkey locked within a framework that outlines Western values and provides a measuring stick by which Brussels tends to judge Turkey's actions. The second school of thought, which has gotten a lot of traction over the last year, especially in American think tanks, is this idea of transactionalism. It says, let's give up on trying to persuade Turkey to change their domestic politics and focus on the near-term security interests that we in the West have. Arguably, you could put the EU-Turkey refugee deal in this category, since it was a way of stopping the floods of refugees from coming in. Turkey got a large amount of money from the EU out of this, and also some promises on visa liberalization and movement on accession that have not fully come to fruition. This, I think, is also problematic. First, I think it's important for Western countries to stay true to their principles, to defend the values that they hold dear on democracy and human rights. And I think especially in terms of engaging with a NATO ally, it's not the right approach to give up on those. Second, if you look at a lot of the challenges that we're facing with Turkey, take, for example, the large number of American and European prisoners who are in Turkish jails on spurious terrorism charges, the solution to those problems ultimately gets to the question of rule of law. And so taking an approach with Turkey that abandons discussions of rule of law is not going to help us solve those problems there. The final approach, and the one that I would advocate, is what I call the engagement strategy. We need to deal with Turkey on a much broader level. The nature of the Syria conflict has meant that most of our conversations with Turkey are focused on very narrow counterterrorism issue. And frankly, security cooperation is not necessarily the best basis for a long-term and healthy relationship. We need to engage with many more levels of government. And this is why I think the visits this week by American officials is helpful, because it's engaging with national security advisors, with foreign ministers, and with defense ministers. We also need to talk to Turkey about a much broader range of issues. We need Turkish cooperation on things like Cyprus reunification, on refugees, as well as stability across Europe. We also need to look at Turkey's economy. Turkey and the EU in particular have a significant economic relationship. I know there's been a lot of conversations within the EU about moves to upgrade the Turkish customs union, with particular resistance from Germany and others. Again, I think this would be a useful step to consider because it locks Turkey into a rules-based framework. Finally, it's important to engage with civil society. I think we need to be realistic about what democracy promotion efforts would look like. But as we've seen in the referendum, there is a good 50% of Turkey that does not agree with the direction that the country is heading in. We need to continue supporting those forces in Turkey, both in terms of our continued engagement with them, as well as our continued public and private messaging about the importance of rule of law and human rights. Thank you.